Welcome in, people. We are picking up right where we left off yesterday, talking through platform values to help you find the guys that are most mispriced in your draft lobby. Today, we are moving from ESPN over to the land of Sleeper. I'd say probably the second most popular platform right now. We're going to talk through 8 players that I think are underpriced and are great values for you at cost on the Sleeper platform. I think the theme of today is going to be quarterbacks. There's a lot of good quarterback values on Sleeper that I found, so without further ado, we're going to jump right in. So I think Sleeper's ADP is honestly pretty sharp for the most part, at least towards the top of the draft. Most of the guys we're going to talk about are in the middle and later rounds, but one that stood out really early in the draft to me was Kenneth Walker, seeing him all the way down at RB 12 at overall 21. Again, similar to how we talked about Chase Brown on ESPN yesterday, if you can get a guy like Ken Walker at the back of the second round, starting off your team with Bijan or Gibbs and then adding him at the back of the second, I think that's about as great as you could possibly start out a draft. So again, I love Ken Walker this year. He got paid by by Kansas City, obviously, right, to come in there, be the bell cow. They gave him over $30 million in guaranteed money. He was really their only big acquisition in terms of like skilled players on the offensive side of the ball. They are still kind of lackluster in terms of their pass catching group and other weapons. You have aging Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, and then a whole bunch of uncertainty behind that. And really the big acquisitions that they made over the offseason were Kenneth Walker and offensive linemen, right? They use primo draft capital on offensive linemen. They pay Ken Walker. The reports so far from camp have been that the Chiefs are featuring Kenneth Walker both in the rushing and receiving game, that they are operating Patrick Mahomes more out of center, even coming off of the knee surgery. Just all signs that they are going to move to a more run-heavy offense. They want to feature Kenneth Walker and make him kind of the motor that makes this offense run. The Chiefs, they have not been able to run the ball at all in recent years, and I think largely that's been due to just really bad RB talent, right? We like to think about running back as, the position doesn't matter, and as long as you have someone replacement level, it's fine. Don't pay a running back, this and that. Well, I think that is largely true. I just think that the group of guys that the Chiefs have had over the past couple of years has just been so pitiful, and you see it when they play, right? Like Pacheco, as much as he's a fun story, late round pick, he had no juice. Outside of that, he was hurt. They have the ghost of Kareem Hunt. They have just all these dusty running backs, and I think they really wanted to change that this year and bring in a real difference maker in Ken Walker, who we saw what he can do in the playoff run for Seattle last year once Zach Charbonnet went down. He was the bell cow. He literally wins Super Bowl MVP, and he looked unstoppable out there. So, moving into this situation, he's going to get every single chance to be that workhorse, and he's going to be running behind the best offensive line he's ever had there in Kansas City. And, I love the setup because I feel like because of how bad the Kansas City running game has been in the past 5 or 6 years, people forget how much of a fantasy goldmine that Andy Reid running backs have been over the course of his tenure when we think about those offenses, right? If you want to go all the way back to his start in Philly, Brian Westbrook, for those who remember him in the early 2000s, was fantastic. You got guys like LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Charles, the early run of Kareem Hunt in Kansas City, guys where they just elevate in the Andy Reid offense, and I think that Kenneth Walker is that level of a talent. If he stays healthy and on the field, I really think he can do it this year and be a top 5 caliber guy for fantasy. So getting him at the back of the second round on Sleeper is a great pick in my opinion, and one that I would make every single time when I'm on the clock. Now, you had to know I was going to talk about Terry in one of these 3 videos. I chose to put him in the Sleeper video because that is where he is priced the cheapest right now, all the way down at overall 56. Wide receiver 25. I have him up at 18, overall 39. I have tempered my expectations a little bit, and still I'm far above market on Terry. Again, I'm just all in on the bounce back for him. I think it just makes a ton of sense. At 29 years old, I'm willing to throw out the injuries from last year and just last year as a whole, right? It starts off on a rocky front. You got the holdout in August coming into camp. Then you leading to soft tissue injuries. You have Jaden Daniels being out. They only played 2 games together last year. I don't think it's fair to count that against Terry, and I think that's what's keeping his draft cost down. If you think about what it looked like in 2024, the only time that him and Jaden have played together, obviously it was fantastic, right? Terry ends up at wide receiver 7, and we don't even need him to do that for this to pay off at cost. I think that it's going to be a lot closer to 2024 than it was to 2025, right? We get a new offensive scheme in there with David Blau at offensive coordinator. In his intro press conference, he literally brought up how he wants to get Terry McLaurin 10 targets a game, and he's going to be moving him around the formation in the offense, which is great. I think if we get more intermediate and underneath targets for Terry to go on top of his deep ball prowess, that even adds more stability to on a week-to-week basis, where that's something we haven't really gotten in his career really ever. So it's an exciting addition there. The target competition is still very limited in Washington. I know they bring in Stephon Diggs. I think that helps the offense. I don't think it necessarily hinders Terry, right? They had really no other receivers that were viable options there. So I think it even could just take a little little bit of the coverage pressure off Terry a little bit. It's not scaring me off of him at all, and I think maybe brings down the draft cost for him a little bit because people are scared off. In which case, I will happily continue to scoop up all the Terry shares. I think that we are drafting him at about his floor right now in terms of his ADP. Right, he has never once finished outside of the top 24 wide receivers in a full season, outside of his rookie year where he wasn't even a full-time player before last season. Right. With the injury concerns, it's not a concern for me. Before last season, Terry had never missed more than 2 games in a single season. I'm willing to chalk it up to, he basically missed all of training camp. Season starts off on a weird note. Like, yeah, you can do all your workouts and stuff off to the side and by yourself, but there really is nothing comparative to getting in true game shape with the team in training camp. I think that set off his season on a pretty rough start and just kind of led the injury downfall. So I'm really not buying into the fact that, hey, Terry's washed, he's going to get hurt every year. Like, it happened once, it sucks, but I think that he's set up way better this year. We've heard nothing but positivity out of Washington, and I think that he's going to smash this ADP. Even if he doesn't and he's just kind of fine, I think you're drafting him at about his floor. So I really don't see any way where Terry busts at ADP outside of an injury where I'm not really concerned about that for him. So all in on Terry. You guys have heard me talk all about him all summer, and you should be drafting him, especially on Sleeper. Now, the first of the quarterbacks I'm going to talk about today is Jalen Hurts, going at overall 67 and QB6 on Sleeper. I have him about a round higher than that at QB4. And I am, again, similar to Terry, where we're talking about a bounce back story. I really do think that we can get that out of Jalen Hurts this year. I feel pretty confident about it. He is finally gotten rid of Kevin Patullo at offensive coordinator. I really think that was like the explanation for a lot of the issues last year. I think it can be boiled down to 2, maybe 3 things, right? Number 1 being Patullo, terrible coordinator. Like, the play calling was vanilla. It was bad. It was just really not good. Number 2, the offensive line was super banged up all year. They rarely had any of their starters in. That's one of kind of the superpowers of the Eagles, is that they just have this otherworldly offensive line that, as of right now, they are fully healthy and ready to go. So that is solved as well. And third, and maybe this is like a minor one, I don't think it necessarily made Jalen Hurts bad, but the vibes with the whole A.J. Brown thing were very weird, and now we have cleared that out. Yes, you lose a great wide receiver in A.J. Brown, but I think that the vibes are going to be better. We've actually seen positivity out of Philadelphia this summer, which I feel like we hadn't seen since they won the Super Bowl. So we like to see that too, right? And, as you think about the offensive coordinator, again, like I said, Patullo's gone. We bring in Sean Mannion over from Green Bay. He is like a respected guy in the industry in terms of like an offensive mind and play caller. He was getting some kind of dark horse head coach whispers this offseason. So I think if he has a good year as the Eagles OC, he absolutely will be in that discussion again. And really, if you think about the Eagles offense, like they cook if they don't have a really bad offensive coordinator. Like if you think about, it's kind of been an alternation over the past couple of years. You have obviously Patullo last year where things were terrible. The year before that, we had Kellen Moore, which is when they were amazing at all accounts and they won the Super Bowl. The year before that, they had I think his name was Brian Johnson, but he was an upgraded QB coach. He was Jalen's QB coach. Didn't work out. They get rid of him before that. Then the year before that, they had Shane Steichen, who obviously is fantastic. And, I think that Mannion is closer to that Shane Steichen, Kellen Moore tier than he is to the other guys. And when you have dudes like that in there, the Eagles offense just cooks. I'm not super concerned about A.J. Brown being gone. Obviously, it sucks. He's a great player. But I think Devontae Smith is one of the few wide receiver 2s that actually can step up into a wide receiver 1 role and, like, really assume that and thrive in it. I think that he's absolutely the goods and can do so. Outside of that, right, in terms of secondary receivers, they bring back Dallas Goedert and draft Mekhi Lemon. They bring in Dontavian Wicks. Like, they're trying to replace A.J. Brown in the aggregate. It's not like there's no one else to throw the ball to. There are guys there. Obviously, they're not as good, but it's not like there's no one else to throw the ball to. And on top of that, right, like the O-line is healthy. We expect the offense to be better. If the offense is moving, Jalen Hurts is just going to get into the end zone more. The reason why we draft him and why we like him is not because he's going to throw for 5,000 yards. But it's because of his rushing, especially the rushing touchdowns. And, to some people's dismay, the tush push has not yet been banned. It is still there. And Sean Mannion, the new offensive coordinator, has come out and said, like, yeah, this play's been successful for us in Philly the past couple of years, and we are going to lean into that heavily. So he's already confirmed they're bringing back the tush push, as I'm sure everyone expected, as I expected, right? Jalen only had 8 rushing touchdowns last year, which is still a lot, but for his standards, it is way below average. In his career, in the 5 other starting years before that, he's averaged 13 rushing touchdowns per season. So I think if we bump that up to like 12 or even, just his average 12 to 13, that already would have brought him up to like a top 5 quarterback last year, despite how disappointing things felt. So I think that, maybe it might feel a little bit weird. People like to hate on Jalen Hurts, but I just think he's a really good value. And, if things run to schedule for him, which I think they will, he just will finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. It's what he always does. And I think we're getting a discount on him, especially on Sleeper. Now, the next guy to talk about here is another quarterback who I really haven't discussed much this offseason, I feel like, and it is Trevor Lawrence. He is going on Sleeper almost at pick 100, all the way down at 98 at QB 12. We got him up about 20 spots higher up at QB 9. I don't really understand this price. I think, we've seen all of the positivity around Trevor, around the Jaguars, really about everyone but the quarterback, and not because he's playing poorly in camp or anything like that, but it's just that, things are the status quo there, and we're talking more about the weapons and, all the dudes that he has to throw to. We have Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter and Parker Washington, of course, and Brenton Strange and Jacoby Myers, and we love Bashal Tutin, and we love Liam Cohen. Part of that is you're not going to figure out maybe who produces on a week-to-week basis out of the weapons group, but in cases like that, it's usually a safe practice to just take the quarterback, right? And I think Trevor, we saw it in the second half of last season where he really started to figure it out and find his groove in the new Cohen scheme. And we saw that, again, in the second half of the season, the numbers back it up. He was the QB2 in points per game after their bye week. So over the past 10 games at the end of the season, that's where he ended up, only behind Josh Allen. And a lot of that was on the back of rushing, too. T-Law had 9 rushing touchdowns last year. He's a big guy, and I don't think they'll be afraid to use him around the goal line as well, similar to a Josh Allen style, right? He can do that, and he showed that last year. And if this offense continues to be as good as everyone expects it to be, and I expect it to be, I think he's going to be a great value at QB 12 price. And, he's got great weapons to throw to, great coaching. I think he's set up for success in a way where he should be going higher than pick 100. So really like the value on T-Law on Sleeper. Now, the next quarterback to talk about is my good pal Brock Purdy. I know you've heard me talk a lot about him, but I'm going to do it again here. I've got him almost 50 spots higher than Sleeper does, which feels crazy, but it's not. They got him all the way down at 117 at QB 15. We got him up at QB 7, and I feel very confident about it, and I have no plans of moving Brock Purdy down. Similar to Trevor Lawrence being the QB2 over the second half of the season, we got a lot of QB2 stats, basically who's the best non-Josh Allen. But Brock Purdy was the best non-Josh Allen in literally just games that he played last year, right? I was all in on Brock Purdy last year. It unfortunately got derailed a little bit because of the turf toe, especially in the first half of the season. But he made 10 starts over the course of the season, 10 out of the 17 games, and he was QB2 in points per game. Absolutely shredded for you, especially in the fantasy playoffs. If you started Brock down the stretch, you really felt that, partially due to the fact that he's really good and has a great system with Kyle Shanahan, and also partially because that Niners defense was really bad and they had to score a lot of points in San Francisco. And, we expect similar from the defense this year. They're going to have to score points. We still obviously have the Shanahan scheme. Now you add in Mike Evans, who I think is the best wide receiver that Brock Purdy's ever had in his career. And I just think regardless of who he's throwing the ball to, Brock Purdy's a really good player, and people just maybe aren't accepting that as much. QB 15 is just an asinine price point, right? If you think about Brock, over the past 3 seasons, which has really been the majority of his career as a starter, he's finished as a top 10 quarterback all 3 times. He was sneakily 8th in rushing fantasy points per game among quarterbacks last year too, so he's got a little bit of a rushing floor. And he's just a guy where, he's on a good team, a good offense, he's a good player, and he consistently shows it year over year for fantasy. And for some reason, people just don't want to accept that, and they push him down the board. So I feel great about Brock Purdy as my QB1, and you can take him in the double-digit rounds, especially on Sleeper, which I think is a complete smash value. Now to another guy I haven't really talked about this summer, but it is Browns rookie wide receiver Casey Concepcion. He is going about 130 overall on Sleeper at wide receiver 50. We got him about 30 spots ahead of that at wide receiver 41. I'm interested in Concepcion because of the role that I think he's going to have and because of the talent that I believe that he is, right? He comes in with round 1 draft capital coming to Cleveland. Yes, not the best offensive environment. I'm not going to tell you that it is, but he's a round 1 wide receiver that we're getting outside of the top 10 rounds. He's going to be a double-digit guy for sure. And the Browns stink is going to hold him down in this ADP. And I think it's just a shot on someone that I think is really talented. And he looks to be, Todd Monken's new Zay Flowers. I know that's a very oversimplified way of thinking about things, but that's the reports we've been hearing this summer. The reports for both him and his other rookie wide receiver counterpart, Denzel Boston, have been all overwhelmingly positive. Casey's going to be the guy who's primarily working out of the slot and moving around the formation more. I think he's going to be the easy button for this offense, especially around the line of scrimmage with manufactured targets. And we saw that in preseason week 1. They were drawing up things for him all around the formation. He was getting involved in the short area of the field and making things happen after the catch, which is what Casey does best. He did it in college at both of his stops. He's going to do it in the NFL. I think he's one of those guys who just kind of moves differently and is a bet on the talent that you can get at a very depressed cost. I think out of the guys that you're drafting around this part of the draft, he has one of the highest upsides because just of his pure talent. And obviously the reason why he is so low is because of the Browns and the quarterback situation. But I think that if you do have a bad offensive line, bad quarterbacks, which is what the Browns have, I don't even know who's going to play. Probably Watson, who stinks, and Shadur also stinks. But when you have those guys under center, especially with not a ton of time to throw, they're going to be looking underneath more, and they're going to be looking for their safety, their check down, their easy button, as I was saying. So I think that Casey is going to be that guy there. They're going to manufacture him touches, both in the rushing and receiving game. And I think he's just a really interesting bet late in drafts that outside of some of the other rookies, I feel like he's not getting talked up as much as a first-round rookie wide receiver would. Maybe it's just the Browns stink, and I'm willing to dumpster dive and go into Cleveland. I think he'll be an asset to own there, especially at this price tag. Next up is the last of the 4 quarterbacks we're going to talk about today, and it is Kyler Murray moving over to Minnesota, the recently anointed starting quarterback, as we all expected, winning the job over J.J. McCarthy. I'm honestly pretty excited about Kyler. I don't know if you need to necessarily take him as your QB1 in drafts this year, but I think he's a great backup who could blossom into like a top 10 caliber option. And if you play in Superflex leagues, he's like my ideal QB2 to draft. If you look at this sleeper price tag right now, overall 157 down at QB 20. We got him up a lot higher than that at QB 16, about 40 overall slots higher. I think that it's just the best offensive environment that Kyler's ever played in. I don't think that he's like a great quarterback, but we've seen Kevin O'Connell over the years just make water into wine in terms of like mediocre quarterbacks, turning them into good players there in the Minnesota system. I think that just we have the stink on the Vikings because of J.J. McCarthy last year, and like I'm just fully convinced that J.J. is truly just that bad, and it's really just clouding our judgment of Vikings. I think that Kyler's going to come in there and steady the ship. I don't think, again, he's an elite talent, but I think that he can be like a league average quality quarterback there in Minnesota, which is really all we need for him to pay off for fantasy. Like, as much as people hate Kyler and how bad they think he's been, as crazy as it sounds, over his 5 fully healthy starting seasons, if he played the season and didn't get hurt and didn't get benched, he finished as a top 10 fantasy quarterback every single time. He's literally never finished outside of the top 10. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room is, the most recent season was the one where he got benched, and he obviously wasn't top 10, and probably wasn't going to be top 10 before he got benched, but I'm willing to throw it out. I think that the new environment, he gets to throw to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison now and work with a great offensive mind in Kevin O'Connell, as opposed to the shit show and just kind of mismatch of scheme and sort of philosophy that they had in Arizona the past couple of years. I think the fresh start is going to be good for Kyler, and again, you can always rely on that rushing floor there, and I think that he'll put it to good work this year in Minnesota. So again, a great backup quarterback or QB2 in Superflex that is just too lowly priced on Sleeper. QB20 is just, he'll finish higher than that if he plays through the season, which I think that he will. And last one to talk about here is a little bit of a deeper cut, but we're going to talk about Keaton Mitchell out in Los Angeles with the Chargers now, coming over from the Baltimore Ravens. Sleeper has him all the way down at 180, RB 58. I got him a bit higher, all the way up at 136, RB 44. I think Keaton's interesting. He's a guy that I've liked over the past couple years. Obviously, he's been kind of hampered both by injury and being behind Derrick Henry in Baltimore, but whenever he's gotten the chance to play and get volume, like, he's been really interesting and like a guy who just makes big plays happen. And I think that ability fits really well into a Mike McDaniel scheme, right? He loves the quick, twitchy running back who can make explosives happen, especially in the passing game. So he feels like a great fit for this offense, like, dare I say, a Walmart version of Devon Achane, now that we have Mike McDaniel in Los Angeles. And it's important to note because McDaniel went and brought this guy in. I know it's like kind of a cliche, tacky story, but the story is that, Mike McDaniel left a wanted poster with Keaton Mitchell's face on it in the GM's office in LA to go and get this dude on the team. So he was obviously very clearly targeted by the new offensive coordinator, and I think that he's going to have a standalone role there behind Omari and Hampton there in LA. The reports in camp have said that as well, like Keaton's mixing in, especially in the passing game, which is interesting. So McDaniel showed in the past that he can have multiple running backs eat in his system, like even in Miami, right? We remember the Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane year, which was just so insane, both of them going crazy. I'm not saying we're going to have the same thing there in LA, but I'm not saying that it's, impossible either. I think that there is a world where that exists, and he's going to have a standalone role, which I think is worth the click all the way down at 180. And, that doesn't even bring up his contingent upside, right? Like, if Hampton were to go down, then obviously Keaton is going to be a priority guy, a dude you're starting every week, which is very, very exciting. And he's just a player I believe in. He's fun, and I think he's a great one to grab in the back half of your drafts, not even back half, last couple rounds, as a guy who could have, a real league-winning upside if things truly do break his way, which, yeah, it's a low chance, but it's more interesting and plausible than a lot of the other dudes that are getting drafted here, which I think make him a great value at this price, and, Sleeper, for whatever reason, has him by far the lowest out of the 3 major platforms. So that's going to do it for today. Let me know in the comments which of these guys or anyone that I didn't talk about are your favorite ones to draft on Sleeper this year. Again, we're reaching into peak draft season, so be sure to stay tuned. We're going to hit on Yahoo values tomorrow, which is also exciting. There's a couple really interesting ones in there to talk about, and we're going to have more videos coming along. Be sure to follow and watch as you get into your drafts.